going out. So you may want to post your statement.
I will.
This-
I will. Is it fixed?
Not yet. Working on it.
Let's just take just a minute.
Feel the.
It's good now. We're, people can hear us.
Okay. Wait, we just changed things, so give it a second to make sure it works.
Yeah, he just said.
Yeah, but we just switched
Oh, you just
computers,
switched
so
it? Oh, okay.
let's see if it actually works. 27.
So are we confident that it's working?
No,
Okay. Can somebody give a thumbs up visually to Lindsay if you can hear this? Not you in the room.
I got a text from someone that said it was on.
We good?
I think so.
I got 3 thumbs up.
Okay.
Great. That's a quorum. Great.
Thanks.
So, before we continue, with public participation, I'm just gonna move one thing up the agenda, because it may just impact public participation. Find it. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the animal control officer. The city council is still working through this. I expect to be able to make an appointment at our next meeting. Not quite there yet, basically, but I'd like to thank Councilman Live and Council President Stegman for their work in helping resolve this. I think we've made good progress, and I think we're very close to making an appointment. I'm just not quite there yet. We just couldn't get the contract reviewed sufficiently in time to do it this evening. So we will take it up at our meeting on February 16th. So I just wanted to let everybody know that in advance in public comment. But other than this, we're gonna resolve the situation on the 16th. That's all I have to say on that subject. And with that, I will open the meeting up to public participation. We're trying a couple of different things this year, and what we're doing at the present is we're allowing the public to speak to items that are on the agenda at the first public comment period. Then at the second public comment period, at the end of the meeting, you can speak to things that are not on the agenda. So if you have things that you want to discuss on the agenda, this is the time to do it. I would ask that members of the public will provide their comments from the podium here unless they have mobility issues. Please state your name and address. You have 3 minutes of uninterrupted remarks or questions, and the council may or may not respond. So are there people in the room who have something to say about anything that's on the agenda this evening?
They can line up, right?
They can line up? Sure. However they want to do it.
My name is Marianne Forge. My address is 5 Compton Court. I'm the chairperson of Parks and Recreation, and I'm also the team leader for the spot. And I just wanted to comment on the thoughts. I think it is essential. It's such an essential opportunity to take advantage of. It's a wonderful property, and it actually contributed to the flooding during Ida and is likely to do that again. It's a very small creek running through the center of the property that's fairly discernible in dry periods that turns into a raging torrent when there's a rainstorm. And Ida was certainly testament to that. That contributed to flooding all the way across Main Street. I believe Councilman Live personally has experience in war before. So you're a witness to that. This is what we can do. Last year, we put together a plan with the assistance of another resident who was also an employee of Princeton Hydro to actually develop the property and using green infrastructure to plant from the top to the bottom of the hill, mostly on the south side of the property, away from the open trees, and then sort of a shrub and herbaceous perennial area, and then a meadow the furthest down. It would be great to do this. There were also, in the plan, there are also some areas that we developed that it's, the stormwater could spread out and be absorbed. The benefit of doing this is that what's up there primarily right now is grass, and grass doesn't really absorb stormwater at all. It's slightly better than pigment is. Have these roots. Planting all these native plants would open up the soil to absorbing stormwater, doing some work on the creek so that there are places where the water could spread out and be absorbed, would really help to mitigate the flooding. I'm not saying stop the flooding, I'm saying it would help. And I think that we really can't pass up the opportunity to do this. So I just, wanted to take a pinch. I did send you guys an email, but I just wanted to follow up in person in case you have any questions or just to show you what I really mean. So, anyway, and in terms of the buildings, I'd love to see that be a source of revenue for us, whether it was through selling them or through renting them, and that's basically it. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, there's so I feel based on
Excuse me, can you not we're working on the sound so it doesn't feed back.
I don't know. I don't think it's hard.
That's better.
Look at the 30-year bond that we hold up. It comes out plus somewhere between $5 to $6 million. That's without the maintenance, the operational costs, and everything else. 40. So, good. I think yours. I think there are parts of that farm that we want to maintain. This farmstead is important, log cabin, and also the barn. I look at your one financial analysis, $1,000 for that. No, I think about what we have to do to save ourselves. Sorry, about a question about the flood legislation. One paragraph that stipulates that on a flood zone, get permits or things that would not normally placing pictures, etc. It's thinking that I get a permit, place carpeting my house and the assessed value of the carpeting for my property, and that
Is there anything else after that?
yeah,
Okay. It's 38 pages. I don't, is Ken Rogers, Ken, are you here?
He's texting. I think he's here. Let me see.
Can we, promote him? Not sure specifically what you're referring to myself, but Ken Rogers might be on and we will.
I think it's on.
Ken, I'm gonna unmute you. Do you have any expertise on this question?
For just verify that you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great. The sound from the little speaker there for the public is sketchy at best. So if you could repeat her question from the dais, I can hear you from the dais, no problem.
15 code for the dais and,
Over here.
but this will be fine.
Any microphone.
Oh, oh, the mic.
Any microphone.
My question is about paragraph in the legislation for the flood about permitting requirements for residents in flood zones to get permits for things that are not normally require a permit. There was also some pretty steep fines and violations for not doing that. My question is, like, to what extent do you permit through carpeting, it says plumbing fixtures, or
Okay, so any work that is done in the flood zone needs a permit from the flood office or from the under the flood damage prevention ordinance with a flood hazard area development permit. It's any work that's done in the flood zone, and then that is used to determine whether substantial improvement or substantial damage was sustained or is proposed. It's separate and independent from a construction permit. A construction permit's an entirely different issue. And yes, there are items that you would do in a flood zone that needs a permit where you would not need a construction permit. And that's always been that way. That's no change in this ordinance.
Right now, it's only. No, so they won't have to unless they trigger the substantial damage. Right.
substantial damage from what, a flood?
Yes.
Right, that was,
So it's only if there's a flood, you have to apply for the flood
No.
permit?
No. If you're, why don't you explain this? Because I know you can do, I know you do a better job than I. So
if
properties that are actually in the flood hazard, the flood hazard area will always, whatever work they want to do, whether it's improving a property or, post flood reconstruction, have to follow the guideline or have to follow the regulations in the ordinance.
that is correct. Any work that you do, you want to pave your driveway, you want to put up a fence, you want to put in a shed that does not require a construction permit, a small shed, put a deck on, replace the windows in your house, which does not require a construction permit. All of those would require a flood hazard area development permit. Any work you do in the flood zone needs that permit. And this is, like I said before, this ordinance does not change what was in place. You always needed that permit.
But I think my concern, so Ken, this is Evan Light. Right now, we passed this ordinance, we're actually expanding the zone. We're expanding the zone in floodplain where people right now are really the 100-year floodplain. If we pass this ordinance, then people in the 500-year floodplain are also affected by these additional claims, correct?
That's correct, but only for substantial damage. We're expanding it to the 500-year floodplain. So it only applies to substantial damage. If somebody wants to improve their property, they can do so without worrying about compliance with the ordinance. It's if there was a fire or a semi truck went through their house or there was a flood that created the substantial damage level of flooding, then they would have to comply with the ordinance.
Thank you, that's my concern.
So then it's not in general.
Okay.
They couldn't go home and play their car.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
I did just want to go over the email I sent about my crossing. I think, but since we were just talking about flood zone, I'm wondering, is there any type of document that has the changes only, like what it is now and what it is on the document and what the changes are? It is very lengthy. and I own a lot. So, it's a lot to go over.
If you have a question. Your other one.
Okay. So I did, I'm glad I took, to the property, and it's very nice up there. But, so I wanted to say that, if we can subdivide or sell off, I think that's the hope of us. Help recapture some of the costs that we lost. We do have other properties too that we struggle with maintaining, so it's adding to the stress as well. The log cabin house is a very nice home. There were some concerns about what the maintenance fees or the utility costs were. But it seems like it's not insulated. There's a very large oil tank, like wine, Lisner, and some ceiling fans. So if it's not sold, would we be able to lease it or rent it as a house? Versus an office? I think there was talk about maybe moving the police station up there, but it seems like it's a house, maybe a group home or group shelter, some sort of assisted living senior center. If we weren't to sell that, the greenhouse could be utilized as a greenhouse. Right now, it's, there's a lot of weeds, it's looking pretty bad, so if we get that up and running as a garden, we could have like a true farm to table restaurants here in town. So maybe there's some kind of restaurant co-op farm that could happen. Maybe even get chickens, then we have eggs, have some kind of CSA farm. The stone house is beautiful. If it's not registered as a historic property, then we should get it registered, and it would make a great bed and breakfast type of event center, or have it as a rental item property. The barns, there's things up there that we aren't using because we sell them. The one had a big refrigerator and freezer in it. I don't know if it's being utilized. So, and the land, if we're not gonna use the land, can that be sold off? Can we, is it even developable land for affordable housing? So, and the one item I didn't include was the market, because it's being utilized, so it's great that it's being utilized. I don't know if it's gonna stay like that, but I'm glad Fisherman's Market is at least using that.
Okay,
So
thank
that's
you.
it.
Yep, so a couple of things. I will note that we posted a memo, I think it's on the website, about the flood damage prevention ordinance changes. That will be updated. I've got one or two things to just note here this evening. We'll make sure that that is posted to the website. I'm happy to email you a copy of it. And basically, in very simple terms, it explains exactly what changes there are to the ordinance. Most of the ordinances is, just moving forward. It's just there've been really almost no changes other than 2 or 3 items. So I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. And if you have any questions about it, I will note that next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, Ken Rogers and I will be hosting an informational session about the ordinance. So any members of the public who have a question about it are welcome to attend. We'll be posting the Zoom link on the city website and also through Lambertville Matters. So we'll have more information about that. I think to your questions about the Clausen property, I think that when I speak about this in a few minutes, I'll probably be able to answer most of them. And I'm happy to follow up with you on anything that I haven't covered in my general synopsis of kind of where we are on the Clausen property. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right, thanks.
Sure.
Just one question about the flood. Is the new map also on the
Yes.
website?
Yes.
Okay,
And I can give you a copy before you go tonight if you like.
okay, all right, thanks.
Hello, Gina Fischetti, 116 Clinton Street. Excuse me. So I primarily wanted to talk about the floodplain ordinance that is on first reading for this evening. I have concerns, particularly about the expansion of the special hazard flood area to the 500-year floodplain. I looked at the map that was posted as part of the agenda meeting documents. And, it's very difficult to discern which properties are impacted by that change. There's no parcel lines indicated on the map. And the lines are, probably as large as some of the parcels, particularly on my block of Clinton Street, where we have like little tiny yards. So I think it would be really helpful to residents on Clinton Street and other parts of the town that are impacted by that significant change to be able to see whether or not our properties are affected. I think that there should be outreach to residents whose properties are affected, because even though, as you were saying, it might only be it might only be if there's some damage to the property. I was looking at the ordinance, and it's not just flood damage. It's
Fire, it's a-
yeah, it's due to damage due to any cause, including but not limited to man-made, structural, electrical, mechanical, or natural hazard events. So it's not just a flood, it could be a fire, it could be an electrical issue, it could be any number of different things that would trigger these new requirements, which are now not required for any homes in the 500-year flood zone. I also want to note that it does disproportionately affect Clinton Street. There are some other residential areas that were not in the special flood hazard area that are now. So I guess my other question is, I read Ken's memo and it indicates that a significant number of claims were made by houses that are not in the special flood hazard area. And that's one of the reasons for making this change. I'm curious how many of those are now being captured. Like, I know from my perspective, at least on Clinton Street, the houses that are now being included, they weren't impacted. As long as I've lived there, they've not flooded. So, I know that there are other houses that are included, maybe on Buttonwood Street or whatever. I'm sure you all know way more than I do. So are these houses that are making the claims being captured by this change? And also, what is the impact to homeowners going to be in terms of insurance costs? And what is the benefit to the city? Like, I'm assuming that there's some sort of cost, there's some benefit that the city is gaining, right? So I'm also curious as to what that is. I have other comments about Boston, but I think I don't have time.
Okay, we can certainly answer some of those questions next Wednesday. I would just say in terms of the 500-year designation, that and the same is true for the 100-year floodplain. That there are times when the parcels are not necessarily identified on the map, right? So the way that we determine those is that there is a hang on a second, my notes. An elevation certificate has to be provided, right? So there's a particular way to get an elevation certificate to see if your property is in the 100-year or the 500-year floodplain, based on the elevation of the property. So while the map that was generated by FEMA and sent to us, does list, for example, most of Clinton Street, if there was a specific property that wanted to know if they were in that designation, they would have to probably generate this document, this certificate. So that's how we tell, and that's true. And there are instances when people aren't sure if they're in the 100-year floodplain, and so an elevation certificate is required. So we're not going to get into questions and back and forth, but I'm just giving you a couple of some basic information. This, including the 500-year floodplain, will also has the potential to lower our insurance rates. Our CSR has the potential to raise our CSR, our community rating system for flood insurance and the NFIP. So there are advantages to insurance people who do have insurance policies through the National Floodplain, through the National Flood Convention, insurance plan. So there are benefits to the homeowners. The city, there's no specific benefit to the city. There's no there's nothing that I can think of offhand. Certainly, we can talk about it, and I can get Ken to address it next Wednesday. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Bird at 255 Brunswick Avenue. To continue the issue of the flood, the flood plan that you're looking at, very complicated subject. Mayor, I'll give you credit that, you really kind of simplified it. There's a couple of things, all right, that are being changed in the very long ordinance. All right, I think what would be nice for everybody to know is to have, here are the new homes in the 500. What's the insurance cost? Okay, for them to have that insurance. And so, to kind of quantify it, it could be big bucks. I hear some of the flood insurance goes from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. And that would be a budget buster for a lot of people. Number two, I see on the agenda is to look at the planner hiring again. All right, my question is, was the meeting held with the state agencies? All right, to give mayor and council good information with which to, kind of move forward on the issue of the Clausman property. And then following that up, okay, I think before you hire a planner, you need to develop a scope of work based upon you as mayor and council and public input to give some guidance, rather than have them guess what we're looking to acquire. Third point, all right, I think I'm doing good on timing. I appreciate the fact that we are, if there's public comment at the beginning of the meeting, okay, but I would suggest or offer as what's been done in the past, which is very effective. All right, when resolutions and ordinances are being considered, to entertain comment then, and then that would kind of add a lot of this where we're kind of getting on each other to try to figure out what's going to be talked about. Because we know we're not going to be able to talk about it later. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I appreciate opening up the Clausen Farm. I thought it was educational to all. Thank you.
Thanks. Just a couple of things. We're not considering a planner tonight. There's nothing on the agenda that.
The alternate planner.
Oh, the alternate planner. Yeah, this has
That's
nothing to
the
do with
alternate
cost.
planner.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
nothing to do with cost of property. Hey, Ken, are you still on?
Yes, I am still here.
Thanks. So there was a question about insurance rates. It's my understanding that, parcels or properties in the 500-year flood zone are not required to have flood insurance. Is that right?
That is correct. And insurance is not a subject of the ordinance. Insurance requirements are a subject of mortgage companies. And if a mortgage company requires it on a property, just because you're close to the floodplain, they can require it and you have to get it to get their mortgage. It's not connected with the ordinance. Our ordinance is just for flood damage coverages and to reduce flood damages in the future.
Thank you. And then just on the last point, we did meet with the SHPO today, the State Historic Preservation Office in Green Acres, and we'll be talking about that in a few minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Jeff Tittle, 33 Wilson Street. A couple of items. One on the ordinance. State of New Jersey is also moving forward with new regulations. PAC rules we haven't seen yet, but there is one where they are changing basically they're adding 2 feet to the 100-year storm as a regulatory line, and the ordinance should probably reflect that, which is separate than the 500-year. In some areas they're sort of compatible, in other areas they may not be. But that is a rule being proposed right now. I think it will be adopted probably by June. And so it's something you need to look at as far as regulatory lines, because it would mean that anything, well, I'll use my house as an example. I'm outside the 100-year storm, but my backyard would probably now meet the new criteria. So I would add a deck or something. I would probably have to come into DEP on it, because it's basically a 2-foot addition to the 100-year storm as the DEP is proposing right now. And so you should be looking at that, as well as other non-structural ways of dealing with some of the flood issues. I just wanted to mention something about, I know, again, we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place with the high school site. that we need to develop affordable housing. But I just wanted to mention that Hovnanian has a very bad track record. I've dealt with them for lots of years. We've caught them piping streams. We've caught them building on toxic sites without actually having a cleanup plan. I was involved with the EPA where 156 Hovnanian developments got caught for failing to follow the Clean Water Act on stormwater. So I just wanted to raise that flag because if you do go down that, and I think you probably will, you really have to do diligence. I mean, in Mahwah, they actually piped the Blue Line stream in the middle of their development. And so I do want to raise that flag and raise concerns. And then my final point will be on Clausen Farm. I was really hoping that instead of having us talk at the beginning, we would at some point have a meeting where there'd be back and forth dialogue after we hear what you have to say and other council people have to say. Because I think it's so important for the town and for our future. I mean, I look at that property and say, you know, this is a wonderful piece of property. There's potential to do so many wonderful things there, as well as preserving and protecting the environmentally sensitive features, the historic building that should get added to SHPO or historic, because right now it has no protection. And what we can do there, potentially, you know, wedding mill, something like the Black Shed, something like the art yard up in Frenchtown, and to get it back on the rateable, so we pay some taxes as well as dealing with the potential of the amount of money we're going to have to spend to deal with buying the property, maintaining the property, and so forth. So I hope we get more detail later and we can have a more further conversation later. Thank you.
Ellen Pettit, 6 Buttonwood Street. I think it's important to understand that this is not going to address flooding. It's just going to address the cost to the public for damage during flood events. And anybody that thinks it's going to protect us from floods, it's crazy. And this is affecting everything, including the things that the MUA does. We have to raise our facilities to address the new delineation of the river flooding. It only relates to river flooding. And I think if we think of this in terms of grandfathering in improvements that expose us as a public, as a taxpayer, to costs that FEMA has to cover in the event of a flood, it's helpful. The more improvements we put into flood-prone areas, the more exposure we have as the public to the cost of remediation after a flood. So the idea would be to get stuff out of the floodplain so that we don't have to cover these costs through FEMA or any other mechanism. And to do that, I think this town is way overdue revising the master plan and the zoning ordinance. I mean, right now we've got development allowed on Lewis Island, really. So I think if we're really serious about flood control, that's what we need to look at. And then for us, the overland flow is critical, and that relates to Hovnanian and any other development up there. Unless we have zero runoff off that hill, our problem is going to be exacerbated with every bit of impervious cover. We just love that down here. Anyway, that's my view.
Good evening, Lori Stagnado, Newell. Just a quick comment on animal control. I wanted to thank everyone for taking the time and doing their research and listening to the residents and their opinions. I really appreciate that. I'm feeling very hopeful. And I specifically wanted to keep them there because I know he's up at night worrying. Some update on the animal situation this week. First of all, kudos to Councilwoman Kaminsky, who came across a situation the other night where a dog had been hit by a car and took off and ran the entire length of town. Luckily, someone saw him run behind Basil's bandwagon in the dark along the canal. Fast forward, happy ending, the dog was found by the owner and a lovely volunteer that came into town to help do the search, Carolyn Murphy. We had 2 lost cats in Lambertville. One was a 15-year-old cat that got out, and after a couple of long nights, we were able to find her. The other cat is it's an indoor-outdoor cat, spends a lot of its time roaming the city, and that cat's been missing since mid-December. I'm hoping that the animal welfare subcommittee will continue and we can work out maybe some thoughts, ordinances that allowed to be around the city when they are at cats. And then another issue that I came upon. Late yesterday, I got a call from people on North Main Street, about a chicken that had been dumped. So the man that has the chickens on North Main Street, he's down to 1 last chicken. The rest have been killed off by cars, etc. That's another thing I wanted to talk about further down the road, as perhaps an ordinance to have chickens contained. But someone dumped a very sick chicken 2 days ago, and they called me late yesterday, and we were able to contain the chicken. It looks like its eye had been picked out. It was very infected. It was walking in circles. I took it home overnight, put it in a bedroom, and pain support. She passed overnight. The other issue we're dealing with right now is a lost parakeet in the city. The owner left for vacation and fell out of the cage, and we're still searching for that. So I actually made the owner call me from Florida, and there are some of us walking around town with her voice recorded. So obviously I'll do anything, including that. So anyway, I just wanted to update you and thank you all again. And I'm going back out there with the recording, so if I'm at the police station later, they think I'm drunk, you'll know why.
Last one. Hi, I'm Michelle Glassberg at 601 Heath Court. I live in Everest Hill. I just have a couple comments about the Blossom property. I was on that great tour Saturday. I've been out there before. It's an amazing property. Very kind of inspirational to walk around. I just have 3 points. One is to please remember that that is the gateway entrance to our city. And I've only been in Lambertville 4 years, but if there's one thing I felt that Lambertville really needed improvement upon, it was that entrance into our city. I felt that it was, except for basically a big parking lot in this BBS shopping center, it didn't really offer much except for that awesome property that obviously used to be the farm market, et cetera. So I don't have any sort of long list of specific examples for you, but all I ask is that you consider that in a broad sense about the importance of what Lambertville stands for when people come either as residents or visitors into our community and what they see as they approach the city from that area. From the other area, you have, Zanya and that beautiful building and everything else. So if you could keep that in mind, I would strongly suggest it. The other item is about stormwater management, and I know it was brought up. And I also walked up there thinking about it. As a full transparency, I work for New Jersey Future, but that's not why I'm here tonight, but it means I am a disciple of green infrastructure. So I urge you to kind of consider the importance of green infrastructure up there. New Jersey Future has a municipal green infrastructure toolkit for municipalities and a ton of free advice and services. I'm sure you're all aware, you've heard my colleague Reed Callahan speak on that. So please keep that in mind also as a critical asset in the future, perhaps for that area. My third point is Fisherman's Mark. While I was on the tour, I got, which I had never been to, is I walked through Fisherman's Mark and I spoke to the volunteers and I spoke to the executive director. And for the first time, got an indication of really what they do and how important that market is to them. So I love having it up there. I think it makes a point about community, taking care of community. So again, in your considerations, if you can keep Fisherman's Mark in mind, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Lindsay, do we have people online who wish to speak?
I don't see any hands raised.
Right.
Oh, wait, one is raised.
Okay.
Gail, you can unmute and go
Hi.
ahead.
Hi, my name is Gail Carabine. I'm 255 North Main, and I'm just talking about the Classen property. And I live across the street, so I enjoy the view for the Classen property and such. I just want people, the council, to keep in mind the flooding we had last year, and just keep that in mind when you're thinking about the use of the property. That you could keep in mind the torrents of water that came down the hill. If there's any more development, it hurt a lot of the, stores closed, went out of business, and then people's lost their houses. And anyway, just keep that. And I'm glad that the city bought the Classen property, and good luck with deliberating what to do. So that's just my viewpoint about the storm management. Thanks.
I can recap what Gail said. That was Gail Carabine from North Main Street. She lives across from the Classen property and is concerned about flooding and the property. She's one of the property owners who the culvert blew up in her backyard and collapsed, and she and her husband Michael were subject to daily visits from the mayor for about 8 months while we tried to fix the culvert. So
And thanks very much.
For many decades, the stream that came down through the Classen property was considered an intermittent stream. And so much water came through that corridor during Ida that it blew out the culvert behind Gail's house. It cost $353,000 to fix. So obviously, I think that Gail's point about stormwater management is a very personal one, and that's why she shared it.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Anyone else? All right, I have a motion to close the public comment period, please.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of closing the public comment period, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Moving on, resolutions. First resolution is resolution number 35-2023. This is a resolution to amend resolution number 159-2022. The resolution of the city of Lambertville, county of Hunterdon, conditionally designated K. Hovnanian Homes LLC as the redeveloper of the property identified as a Lambertville High School redevelopment area, block 1073, lots 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 32, 33, and 33.01. Block 1090, lots 4 and 5, and block 1091, lots 1 and 1.01. Pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law, NJSA 40A:12A1, retroactive to November 19, 2022. So this is a resolution basically to extend the conditional redeveloper designation for K. Hovnanian, allows us to maintain escrow funds so that we can use our planner and our engineer and our redevelopment attorney to consider whatever it is that we're considering in regards to redevelopment, mentioned moving forward with that with the redevelopment of that site. I would just note, only because we noted this in August, the concept plan that was presented at that time presented a total of 202 housing units, and 20% of those would be affordable housing units. So that would be just about 40 affordable housing units and about 160 townhouses. That was the number that the plan that was presented. That's not necessarily the final plan. We have not. There's been no decisions made. We are moving forward in good faith. With that, we will keep the public advised of our progress. Are there any questions from the council on this?
So what's the new end date on this? Is it,
It's 6 months from November 19th.
okay, So we're like 3 months into it.
Right.
Okay.
Any questions or concerns or comments from the council?
No, I would just like to say that Evan and I have just started, getting involved in this and taking a look at it, and certainly stormwater is one of the questions that, we are asking, so just that duly noted.
Yes, duly noted. There's not been a single conversation I've had with anybody who's talked about building anything in this town where I have not said stormwater like 10 times in the first paragraph of my remarks. So, yes, and if you come to planning board meetings, you'll know that it's all about stormwater. So,
It just provide the opportunity to meet with them. That was the number one
right, yes,
question that
Yes.
I had about meeting and exceeding whatever the rules are at the for to not make it worse for people who live downstream from the hills. As you know, I live on the hill and try to do our best to contain our stormwater management, to retain more of the water from going downtown, because of the saying is, water doesn't flow up straight, so.
all right, unless there are any other council remarks, I'd ask for a motion to approve resolution number 35-2023.
Make the motion.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next resolution is 36-2023. This is a resolution to award the contract for the alternate city planner to Topology using the fair and open process for a 1-year appointment with funds paid through escrow accounts. This is just something, a bit of housekeeping that we overlooked at the reorganization meeting. It's good to have a backup, we often have kind of backup planners and engineers. Occasionally there's a conflict with one of our professionals. That happened a couple of times last year. Our planner last year lived in Lambertville, so she had to recuse herself from several matters, in which case the planner from Topology stepped in. So this is really just a housekeeping matter. We probably won't even use them this year. Are there any questions from the council on this? You have a motion, please, to adopt the resolution. For a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Let's see. All right, we are now at ordinances first reading. Consideration this evening would be given to possible ordinance number 01-2023. This would be an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Lambertville, amending the City of Lambertville Code of Ordinances to repeal Chapter 19, to adopt a new Chapter 19, to adopt flood hazard maps, to designate a floodplain administrator, and providing perseverability and an effective date. I would note that we did get some changes back from the DEP just this afternoon to the language. Most of it was not anything, none of it was substantive. It was all minor language. There were two things that I would note that came back that are changes to the ordinance. We did release a memo, I think a couple of weeks ago, that explained the proposed changes. There are two slight changes here that I need to make the public aware of in the council. The freeboard height is not changing with this ordinance. Previously, we had sought a 1 foot above the New Jersey design flood elevation, which is the 125-year flood. The DEP has requested that we maintain our current freeboard height, which is 2 feet above the base flood elevation. What we had sought for would be slightly higher than that, but it's using a different flood elevation. So basically, that is not changing in the ordinance. That would stay the same as as our current ordinance. The only other thing to note of substance is that it was noted that variances to historical structures will now be automatically granted. So in the past, when you needed to go to a variance because you had a substantial damage determination, you would have to file an application for the zoning board, and that costs about $1,000. You'd have to go before the board in order to have that variance potentially granted.
We suggested changing it so that the floodplain administrator would have that authority. But when we did that, the state came back and said it's automatically granted. So that's some good news. That streamlines the process for those people who need variances for substantial damage determinations on their properties. Everything else is, is unchanged in terms of what came back today. I would just note that we just cleaned up some of the language. The definition of market value is now specifically identified as the tax assessed value of the structure itself, excluding the land and any accessory structures. This provides for uniformity in all substantial damage improvement determinations. We've also decided to include the 500-year zone or the 2% annual chance area of flooding. So there's a couple of things about this. As noted in the memo, a flood insurance study was performed during the 2022 CRS recertification process, and it revealed that there were many flood insurance claims made outside the 100-year zone. And in fact, that number is between 20 and 25% of the insurance claims in the city are made outside the 100-year flood zone. And I will note that there's some information that I've come across in New Jersey that percentage is 31%. So 31% of New Jersey insurance claims are now outside of that 100-year flood zone. So this is a growing problem. Manville included the 500-year floodplain in their amended ordinances, as are other municipalities. And just note a couple of other things. The Raritan River at Bound Brook has now hit the 500-year floodplain 3 times in the last 20 years. So, there's more water coming. We know it's coming, and it's impacting our communities. So this is why we wanted to take a more proactive. I wanted to take a more proactive stance on this. The flood insurance claims have been repeatedly paid out without any requirements to comply with flood damage prevention measures. Expanding the special flood hazard area while keeping some of the same requirements from within the existing area will eventually reduce losses and claims. And it's probably going to give us some points and further opportunity to gain community rating points. If we get enough points, we get a better, a higher discount in our flood insurance across the city. Our inclusion of the 500-year floodplain also excludes substantial improvement. So that means if you live in a 500-year floodplain, you can do whatever you want to your house. You're not, it doesn't trigger any changes to any improvements that you want to make. It only triggers if you suffer substantial damage, right? So if there's a flood and you're in the 500-year floodplain, if you're affected by this ordinance, if you hit the substantial damage determination, then you would now need to seek a variance to not raise your house. What the variance would do would be fill your cellar in with gravel and create flood vents and raise your mechanicals. So that's basically, the trigger for the 500-year floodplain is really only when you're substantially damaged in that floodplain. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that we're predicting that's going to happen this week or next week or 5 years or 10 years. It just gives us a little bit more ability to get CRS points, and it gives the city a little bit. I think it's an important point if we're thinking about resilience and about planning for the future. So let's see if there's anything else in here that I'd like to mention. Other than that, as I mentioned earlier, next week, Wednesday evening, we'll have an informational session via Zoom to answer any further questions. Does the council have any questions about the changes to this ordinance?
So I believe Gina Shetty, she brought up that there were a lot of damages claims made that may not fall into this 500-year floodplain, and that there are a lot of people in the 500-year floodplain that didn't have damage that are now going to be affected by this if they do in the future. So and another resident brought up that obviously this isn't preventing any flood. This isn't like an engineering plan or anything like that. So I do have concerns about that. I will tell you personally, on our street, on our next street, there were 3 houses that had electricity after the flood, and all of those were ones that had to raise the electric. So I think there's a lot of good things in here, but I am very concerned about the 500-year floodplain because 1, we don't have to do it. 2, residents may not know about it, and I appreciate that we're obviously getting the word out there to do that. But if they have a flood, and I didn't even realize it until Gina brought it up today, but if there's a fire on that area or some other substantial damage, and then we have some natural, disaster like a flood, those people are all going to be stuck with that substantial damage requirement. So I think we really need to look at whether or not we want to add the 500-year floodplain to it. I see benefits, but I also see concerns as well.
Any comments?
Right, so, well, it seems like maybe we want to have a better understanding of what the actual benefits are before we take on imposing this restriction, right? And my understanding is we'll get overall better insurance rates for flood insurance.
That's possible.
It's possible.
I'm not saying it's definite, but it's possible. Yeah.
It matters.
Everything that we do to build our, to protect our residents, our property, all of these things get factored into our rating. The city's consistently, I will give Mayor Delvecchio a lot of credit. In 2007, his work in planning and mitigation strategies were instrumental in bringing down our insurance rates and raising our rating. So, we're within striking distance. I don't know if Ken's still on the line, but we can talk about this on Wednesday if he's not. We're in striking distance of getting a 5% reduction on insurance rates across the board next year. Some of that will come from activities like holding annual meetings or biannual meetings to talk about flood mitigation. Some of it will come from, kind of these kind of ordinance, these kind of measures that we would take up to show that we are, being kind of more proactive in terms of our approach to mitigation, resiliency, and planning.
I am still here if you
Okay.
have a question.
Ken, you want to have anything to say about that?
Yes, it's like you just said, it's going to add points to us. If it takes every 500 set of 500 points to increase our rating by one step, so we get an additional 5% discount. Right now, we're 260 points, I think, or 240 points away from stepping it into the Class 6, which we might get with the things I just submitted to the CRS people. But if we get 200 points for including the 500-year floodplain, and we need 300 points to get to the next level, then that's not going to do it. But it is cumulative. It's going to get us the points that we need to continually increase the insurance discount to the residents and to the city.
Gina's point about letting people know that this is happening. And I know it's difficult to overlay the 500-year floodplain over the tax map and, the liability issues and that, but trying to get people to, to look and see, to take extra effort to to notify people because, there are some effects of it that, that they should be aware of because it is a change. And I don't know if we can, put something on the website or every week in Lambertville Matters, if there is the need to do a second Zoom, something just to make sure that, that people know, especially in the streets, that we think, or if we can call it out on the web. I don't know what the, there's a note right up front.
Well, yeah, I would just say it's certainly has been in Lambertville Matters, which reaches 2,500 residents here in the city. So that's a pretty, I think that's a pretty good outreach on a weekly basis. There are obviously the council meetings. There's obviously the website. I don't know if there's some other. I mean, we've got a meeting scheduled for next week. We can certainly schedule another meeting. Short of knocking on every door on Clinton Street, which I don't have time to do. It is incumbent on, maybe Gina can help us out here, right? Knock on doors and say, listen, this is important. Do you want to be participating in the conversation?
Just like we could put just a little special box on the website so you see it and it. It's just helpful because, and we have done outreach. I'm not, completely the outreach, but I'm just saying, as we get closer to adoption that, we make the last effort.
I'm happy to do as much outreach.
can,
I'm happy to do this every week with Ken or maybe Ken's not happy to do it every week. But to the extent that, we can be available to answer questions, we will.
Right.
And
people can email them
Okay,
with their
right.
questions or whatever.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can I also mention that
when the planning board sends a notice out to people within 200 square feet, that list is generated off of our tax information. So perhaps we can spot or call that list to send out a flyer, letter to those people that would now be included between the 100-foot mark and the 500. So
I think the reason why I'm concerned is you can look at my street, Arnett, we have 2 residents there that still have not been able to comply with these laws. So with the substantial damage, we have one person who's been told to go in his basement and the other person unfortunately passed away, and they have to try to sell this house without a CO because they haven't complied with that. So it's really important to think about this, how this is going to affect people. Without a doubt, it's going to help in future floods, but it's not going to help the next flood. And that's the concern that I have, that people know that this is going to affect them and how it's going to affect them, because it's significant.
Well, yes, and we've learned during Ida that it was significant, right? I was having a lot of very difficult conversations for months after I was elected. And my first months in office, I had people crying in my office about substantial damage. So I know this very well, but if we're not going to start taking a very proactive, slightly loud approach to looking at dangers right in front of our communities, then I don't know what else to do. I mean, I watched from Irene, how many houses down on North Union Street sold after Irene, after the fire companies pumped water out of house after house after house. Probably 7 or 8 of those houses sold. And, now there are basements down there that are filled in with gravel with flood vents, and houses are selling down there again. So, we have a responsibility to be as proactive as we can, but I would also argue that the homeowner who buys a house, whether it's in the central business district and they're concerned about parking or on a creek, people have to be thinking about where they're buying the properties and how to protect them, right? I don't know how many people have flood insurance in the city. Probably not as many as should, right? So, I would argue that while we can do what we can and what we should to promote this kind of, I think, responsible approach to climate change and flooding, we should be doing it. But it's also incumbent on residents to look after their properties and to be here at meetings like Gina or other people, right? There's only so much the council can do in terms of outreach, and I think that we do a pretty good job. So I feel strongly that this ordinance is a good one, and that these changes are important. And there aren't that many hills I'm really willing to die on. I'm pretty comfortable compromising on a lot of things, but I think that this is one that's really important for us to move forward with.
So a question I would ask, which is maybe a paraphrase of what I asked earlier, is if we don't incorporate the 500-year requirement or level, I'm not sure what the word is, what's the downside of that? The downside would be people in that region get substantial damage during the flood. And then how does that affect recovery from government organizations that have seen us not adopt that requirement? That's a question I would ask, because I'm wondering, and I don't want to belittle this because they say, hey, not adopting this, are we saying that, yeah, I understand that we're putting this restriction on people and that it needs to be communicated, but are we shortchanging them when the time comes along and we've not adopted the appropriate safeguards so that, a government organization is not as forthcoming with recovery funds? That would be a question that I would have. So I don't know.
I would assume that because the government is only requiring us to do the 100-year floodplain, that they would not say that you did something bad because you didn't include the 500-year floodplain. But I do think, obviously, I mean, looking at this, there are a lot of really good things that obviously should apply. It's just, you know, a balancing act, because again, it's not going to prevent the next flood, but it will help the recovery from the floods after that, without a doubt. Lifting the electric up and moving mechanicals, absolutely. But the people that own those homes now that bought them, that didn't buy them into there, they're now going to have to deal with that. And, you know, it's a societal issue. So,
Right. So, so now they have an obligation that they didn't anticipate when they took ownership of the property, right? Right, and that's,
But
it's a big deal.
but it's a good one. You know, the power example I brought was a great example, because when you go down past Elm Street and down on North Main, all those houses, 95% of them had no electric, except a couple that were required before to lift. And my house had a fire in it, which is why it was required to lift. And we were one of 3 houses that had electric, and we were this close to losing it. And it was because of things like this. So there's a lot of good things, but you know, it's a question of, do we need to go there now? And you know, I'm not sure.
So what would you propose as, you know, a compromise or you know, a partial, what would you propose differently?
Well,
Timing of this,
so
a 250-year flood?
I don't know, but I think the mayor brings up good points about,
Mhm.
well, how it affects, you know, the people in that 500-year floodplain. But then we look at the flood that we just had, and some of the area that is included in this wasn't an issue there. So, you know, maybe the next flood will. But do we look at Buttonwood, for example, which did incur damage there? They're completely out of this. You know, if we want to be progressive, maybe we, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, yeah, we're getting lost here in very complicated hydrology. You know, just because something's in, a lot of our damage in Ida was not in a 100-year or the 500-year floodplain. It was in neighborhoods that, you know, don't typically get flooded because we don't typically deal with flash flooding. So we're talking about new metrics here to some degree. You know, I just think that, you know, when you look at expanding this to the 500-year floodplain, what it does is it just doesn't, it kicks the can down the road insofar as it doesn't trigger until somebody has substantial damage in the 500-year floodplain. But then it's mindful of the fact that when they do, then the next event is going to be, the property will be more prepared, right? So it's building in some, it's just building in structure for future events, not just the next one, but the one after that, and the one after that. So, you know, I'm gonna, unless there's any other major points, I think that we need to move this to a vote, because I don't want to continue on with this all evening. I think that we'll have opportunities to talk to Ken. We'll have another opportunity to discuss this. You know, the second reading on this won't be until, second reading and public hearing would be February 16th. So, unless anyone has anything, important, they think is really compelling, I'm going to ask that, somebody make a motion.
Oh,
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is everyone ask for a roll call on this, please?
Councilwoman Kaminsky,
Yes.
Councilwoman Lambert,
Yes.
Councilman Wide,
Yes.
Council President Segrin,
yes.
Mayor Noah.
Yes,
May I ask a question?
of course.
If there's substantial questions that we cannot answer, or is it possible to, when February 16th comes for the second reading, is it possible that we could delay it, or are we?
You want to answer that? You shaking your head, yes, so.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We can open the public hearing and continue it until another date, or if the council prefers, they can announce at the noticed hearing date that it's being carried to another meeting, but it would have to be noticed, the hearing would have to be noticed again, since it is well aware, so it'd have to be noticed again, and we'd have to provide that date at the next meeting on the record, and then you could do that. So that's an option.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. Gives us a little time to have more conversation, I guess. Good. Thank you. Moving on, the next item is ordinance number 02-2023. This is an ordinance to amend Lambertville City Code 2014, Chapter 7, to add a handicap parking space, handicap parking, section 7-4.8, to add a handicap parking space in front of 41 Clinton Street. We do this pretty regularly in cases when we have residents that are handicapped and need parking near their house. So that's what this is about. I don't know if anybody on the council has any questions about this.
You know, generally, we ask the police to look into it.
If we took a look at it, does it impact the residents in front of the spot?
The public hearing on this would be February 16th, voting session. May I request that you introduce on first reading ordinance number 02-2023. All right. Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. I've already given an update on the animal control officer. Council, I may have to step up the dais here. Is there any update for the Church Street work? There is, I need to step down.
No, not, just we're still working through it.
Okay.
So it's really not.
Okay. Exactly. So on the agenda tonight, we have the Clausen property, discussion about it.
What's constituent?
Constituent concerns. Everybody's happy. There are no constituents. Everybody's good. Raise your hand if you're happy. Happy-ish. Yeah. I meant to take that off the agenda a little earlier, but there was a lot going on today and I didn't get it off.
Oh,
We usually keep it on in case there's like, I think the Church Street would have been constituent concerns. Anyway, you know, so last year's been busy. We haven't really had a chance to focus on a lot of sort of pending city business, and that's okay. In some ways, the Clausen property has very quietly sat for the last year. I've checked on the houses several times a week during the winter to make sure everything's sort of in good order. And now we're ready to pivot, I think, the council and I, to looking at this property, to looking at the city asset, to making some forward movement, hopefully soon. And so tonight, really, my goal is to just go through a few of the basic facts about the property, how we acquired it, a little bit of history about that, kind of where we are, and then just to give the council, council members each a few minutes to sort of say what they will about the property. This is just the beginning. We're really at square one in many ways with this property. We will be talking about ways in which to engage the public over the coming months. We'll make sure that there's plenty of public opportunity for the public to weigh in. I've already been receiving emails and some calls, for which I'm grateful. Last Saturday, we had a terrific event up there. I was so happy that so many people came up to the property. Lots and lots of people sharing ideas. And people who have not been up there genuinely excited to see the fine condition of the Holcomb house and kind of walk the hills and look in the barns and all that kind of stuff. So we're really starting kind of almost at the beginning. I'm just going to note a couple of facts here, just bringing us back a little bit. The purchase of the property, the consideration of purchasing the property goes back to kind of the fall of 2020. So we're coming up on 3 years when it was first sort of considered. I'll note that back in November of 20, at one of the council meetings in the closed session, the tax assessor valued the property for development rights at $2.91 million, which then became the basis for the sale price. What's that? Sorry. Okay. The council meeting in November of 20, on November 10th of 20, they introduced the ordinance authorizing the purchase of for $2.9 million. And then there was a second reading and public hearing of that ordinance at the end of November for the purchase. during that meeting, there was a lot of public support. There was a lot of support during the public comment period, most especially for the preservation of the open space. I would also note that kind of during this process, the community advisory team did some public outreach. I'm not going to go too much into that, except to say that there was strong support through the surveys done on the CAT for preservation of the open space. The CAT never really looked at, didn't really have time to sort of begin examining questions about what to do with the buildings because Ida hit. And so there was just a sense that the two things that came out of, I think the two most salient points that came out of kind of the CAT work was that people were in support of preserving the property, the open space, and that people were in support of a farm market on the site. The city purchased the property in June of 2021. And currently we own the property. I think it's important. We did this a little bit, I think back in August. And I just want to kind of give a recap of that. So, you know, I know that there have been some concerns about the cost of the property. I'm happy to release this to the public. I just sort of finished it today. I thank Sue Baycorn, if she's here, for helping me kind of pull together these expenses. The total year from 2022, the expenses for the Clausen property included the LMUA, JCP&L, Veolia, oil for the furnaces, and the landscaping. The total expenses were $18,228. That's what it cost us last year to keep the property up and running. You know, we're very mindful of the cost of fuel, so I kept the furnaces fairly low at 50 degrees. I was up there checking on the pipes, so that's what it cost us to maintain the property. At the last meeting, I figured in the estimated municipal tax loss, which, you know, you can take it or not. I mean, there was some concern, you know, there were people I think wanted to understand what the tax loss was on our purchasing the property. Based on the 2021 assessment, the municipal tax for that property was $5,300. So the total tax, yes, I just checked it. It's $27,000 in 2021 for the property tax, and our municipal share was just over $5,000. So if you include the tax loss in that brings the total to $23,534. I would note that we had revenue from Fisherman's Mark, $12,000. And also we were able to take $7,000 for the landscaping fees out of the open space tax fund. So that offset the actual cost. So, you know, if you don't figure in the loss of municipal tax, it's really, you know, it's a wash. $18,228 to maintain the property last year, and $19,000, including the Fisherman's Mark rental and the money that we're able to use from reserve from open space for the maintenance of the property. So just wanted to note that up front. Obviously, it does cost us money, and obviously we will be paying on the debt very soon. That is well noted also. Let's see. The council president Stegman and I met with a representative from Green Acres today, and also the State Historic Preservation Office. So as everybody probably remembers, the property, you know, initially the property was split up into an exception area and the open space component, right? So the plan initially was that the open space would be funded through Green Acres and potentially other preservation sources. And then the city would maintain an exception area, which included all the buildings. Basically, it's a fairly tight perimeter line around all the buildings. So bearing that in mind, you know, we met with Green Acres and State Historic Preservation Office today. And a couple of things that I think are important to note as we move forward in this process. The State Historic Preservation Office, the property is now owned by the city, and it's listed on the National and the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. As such, anything that we do on the property will be subject to a review process from the State Historic Preservation Office. So if we decide to sell part of the property, if we decide to change any part of the property, there'll be some review process by the State Historic Preservation Office. I would analogize it to like going before the planning board, right? You've got something that you want to do, you need some authority to do it. And depending on what you're asking them, they probably are pretty amenable to small things, right? But if you talk about tearing down the Holcomb house or moving the barns, that's a problem, or that's a process. So, we just need to keep in mind that whatever we decide to do, we'll have to go through the State Historic Preservation Office process. The other thing that came out of this meeting today is, we talked with Green Acres. Where we stand with the Green Acres now is we have filed initial paperwork for Green Acres. And the amount that we would get funded for is based on 50% of the what's called the AAV, the average of the appraised values. And we talked a little bit about this in the fall. The average of the appraised values came in at $467,250, which means that if we continued with Green Acres funding, we would get half of that. So that means we would get to about $234,000 from Green Acres in terms of funding for the property. We could also, we talked about this again in the fall. It's quite likely that we would get about the same amount through the county for open space. So, you're talking roughly, $450,000, $500,000 in open space funds if everything goes well. Obviously there are a number of requirements that we have to meet for Green Acres. There's a preliminary assessment report, recorded deeds, survey submissions. We could submit soft costs, and we're basically free to do anything in the exception area. Although it was noted that easements for access, for example, to the property would be required. So we're talking basically about the driveway. So if we move forward with Green Acres, we would make sure that there has to be access to the property, to the open space, and that would be through an easement on the existing driveway. We also found out through Green Acres that we could put parking on the open space for the park itself, right? So there are a number of things that we could do to the open space that Green Acres does allow. Otherwise, there's no, once you take the Green Acres funding, there's no saying, oh, we want to move the line a little bit, or we want to do this or that. You can't really do it. Once we're in, we're in. So that's where we are in terms of the property. Just see. Did I get all that right, Council President? Or anything else that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, but I went through specific asks, so I knew what the control that the Green Acres agreement would have on certain things that the city might want to do on that property. Well, there were two questions. Number one, what we did in the, what we plan on doing in the exception zone doesn't impact Green Acres funding. And there's really no, they're out of it as far as that goes. That's when we deal with the SHPO to whatever we do on where all the buildings are. They come into effect as they do even down here, or with so many feet of distances, and they get very much involved. But I ask questions like, what can we do on it? Does the open space stop us from doing certain things on the exception zone? And the answer was no. So that's a good thing, because I didn't know that they had no control over it. I asked questions like, well, can we put trails in? Can we hold events on Green Acres? Like concerts, weddings, really, anything that would enhance the use of open space as far as they're concerned is fine. We wouldn't have to get permission from it, anything like that. As the mayor said, they said if we want to put a pavilion, wherever that is, up on Green Acres, up on that property, we can do that. If we want to put restrooms on that property, we can do that. If we want to have parking that services the park, we can do that on that property. Granted, it will be not impervious. I mean, it would be very low impact gravel or something. And what folks have said here before about we can start to stormwater management up there as well. So I was pretty happy with how involved they were with making this work for us in some ways. They even made a suggestion that we'll talk about maybe moving some of the lines, so it makes it easier for us, and there's less impact on the exception zones. But that was very minor, but it was interesting that they came up with the idea we did. So it was about removing a small part of the Green Acres funded boundary to allow the farm market property to have to not be as controlled as it is now, by just expanding that footprint a little bit and lessening the Green Acres. It's very small, but it was a great idea. We also learned about additional grants that may be available. It's called the Stewardship Grant, and that is also administered by Green Acres. And Historic Preservation said, you know, they'll help us as far as working way through regulations. And it was a very positive conversation. You know, I did not know going in what we could do, and I learned a lot from what we couldn't do, which was, you know, very minimal on that. So it was a good meeting, and the takeaway is, I just wrote a little something, just I would hit a couple of points here. Well, I'm the only one left that voted for this, so I take on the responsibility to make sure that what we do helps to ease the burden on taxpayers. And my understanding is that the money that we get from Green Acres, as well as perhaps selling any property in the exemption zone, goes to debt service, to decrease the amount of the bond. Now, you know, so there'll be, so I look at it this way: we're paying off something that we're going to pay off over years as it stands now, but we're going to decrease the amount of impact on the taxpayer, and that's the benefit. It's not like taking the $200,000 and, you know, having it offset some other cost in the city, which number one, we're not allowed to do. So you know, that was very important information that I had gotten. And I remember that when I was talking to council members about, and this is even before the $1.5 million was floated around, was that, you know, I was confident that if we needed money or funds, we could sell off, you know, some of the other assets, meaning the farm market property and the log home property. Get them back on the tax rolls and be very specific on the farm stand property with the input from everybody of what they would like to see on that property. It would help us determine, you know, the way to monetize that particular property. So whatever we do with those two, with the buildings, and there's no talk about turning the headquarters building or selling that at this point, because I think collectively we feel the importance of it as to the city. So I would say that, you know, whatever we wind up doing with the two buildings specifically now, not the headquarters building, it's a process we're going to have to go through, obviously. But since now I'm comfortable with the thought of moving forward with a focused plan on how to treat the open space. And whether we take the money from Green Acres, I was very hesitant that it would cause us not to be able to monetize the other parts, and that's not the case anymore. So following that meeting, I think that we could proceed on starting to deal with and come up with plans for the open space, because whether we take the money or not from Green Acres, we still have that property. Very comfortable with discussing with council and the public is what do we want to see on the open space? We have two of our current commissions in town, which is Environmental Commission and Parks and Rec. I think that they're going to be involved with this process. I don't know at this point if we need professional guidance, because whatever the plan that we do, it's got to be approved by Green Acres. So at one point, there's going to have to be professional advice somewhere. And at the same time, I think we can talk about in depth about what people want to do with what the purpose of the headquarters building is, because we own it, obviously. And I think the concentration at this point should be a public discussion on that building and how best to utilize it. So it's kind of like we're going to build, I just refer to the property as the headquarters park, which will be the preserved area, and what we as a community want to see happen on that property. The other two buildings, we'll work through that with the public about what the best thing is to do. I too think we own too many buildings in town. And it's not a bad thing if you can keep maintenance and afford to keep them at. And, that being said, there's some other buildings in the town that haven't had any work done on them in several years. It's also a decision that we're going to talk about with the public. But for now, I think we should just start the process to work on the open space on the headquarters property, and at least start to get a plan together, because that's what's going to that is what's going to help define what that property stands for and the asset that it is to the community. Right, that's pretty much my feeling on it from today. It was really a great meeting.
All right, shall we just go down the line? Councilwoman, would you like to say a few words?
Very few. A couple of things.
Okay, you're done. Steve, use your time, sorry.
My time.
30 seconds, please.
Actually, I wanted to call out Mary Ann for her email.
Yes.
To us, and I apologize for not acknowledging it, but it was a great email and you spoke eloquently. And I really think that two things are foremost in my mind with this property. But before I tell you what those things are, I just want to say, I want to point out that this is the only piece of property the city ever bought without a referendum. Okay, and I don't know that we can say there was overwhelming support, because we don't know how much support there really was. The people we heard from, there was a large outcry based on a survey that did not reach, I think it was like 300 people. But the important things for this property, now that we own it, are stormwater management. That is really, to me, that's probably the most important thing, because it affects the entire
community directly. And we saw how directly 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. The second thing is to really pull out as much revenue, regain as much revenue as we can from this property based on the mayor's state of the city comments and our debt service. It's something that we struggled with. We took on additional debt as a result of this property. And it's something that I'm really strongly interested in pursuing, ways to recoup as much out of the property as we can, especially in light of the fact that, our assessments or appraisals rather didn't come in where we would have liked them to be. What does that mean in terms of a financial gap in the plan? I got there was some feedback from our last meeting when we didn't approve the planner contract. And I want to reiterate for the public that it was, and I think I speak for other council members, it wasn't, no, we don't want a planner. It's no, we don't want a planner at this particular moment. So in aligning with Council President Stegman, I think, the engagement of some professional services in the near future is appropriate. That's it.
I had the opportunity to go see the Classroom property for the first time on Saturday. I really appreciate the mayor opening that up to everyone, although it's really been open for a while. We just don't use it enough. And so I thought it was great that you got people to go there and really walk around and see it. It really is a beautiful property, and there's a lot of possibility that we have. I enjoyed walking through it with my son, who's 7, and it was interesting to see how he looked at this property too. And the open space is beautiful. I mean, we're lucky that we have it. I do think we might have paid a little bit more for it, but we own it, and that's a great thing. So we need to really utilize it well. I do have concerns obviously about the headquarters property, Washington headquarters. It's a really cool property there. I hope that members of the public get an opportunity to use it as meeting space. The mayor had a really neat idea that the next time it snows, when people out there sledding to open up that main room there and, do hot chocolate and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. And, really brings that, idea of community together. I think that the log cabin and the farm market, I don't think the city should be landlords. That's not what we should be doing. And if we have the opportunity to sell those, I think we should really consider it. I know personally a lot what Fisherman's Mark does for the community, the city can't afford to do, and they really fill a hole for a lot of the social services that we can't afford to support. So there's a lot of benefit to having them there. And I know they've expressed interest in possibly buying it. One, we want to make sure that we get market rate for that. I think we have to balance the fact that if they do buy it, I don't know if we're going to be able to get tax revenue from that ratables. It is what it is. Again, as I said, they fill a need. They do a lot of stuff that the city can't do. So, I think that's worth having a conversation, even though, we might not be able to, add that on as a rateable. In the meantime, as we discuss this, and obviously as Councilwoman Lambert said, I personally do believe we do need a planner engage those professional services at the appropriate time. So I know I had a couple residents reach out to me to ask me about that. And I do think, at the appropriate time, we're going to get a planner. And I think we're close with that. But I first think we really need to talk as council and obviously get engagement from the public about whether or not we want to keep everything. And I think that at least in my experience, the majority of people have expressed interest in parceling off the market and the log cabin. And, if that's what we're going to do, I think we should go ahead and do that. Especially because it's going to get us the money back right away. Once we get that on the market and sell it, those funds go back into the city. So that makes a lot of sense. But as we have this discussion, I think we also want to do things that are low cost to get people to go out there and start enjoying it right now, especially with the warm weather. One of the ideas that I talked about with the mayor was, picnic tables. It's low cost, it's simple. Get people out there to go out and enjoy it. There's little things like that. Maybe putting a walking trail out there. I think we've got to look at the lighting out there at night because, it's a little bit difficult to walk around. It's pitch black, you're going to get hurt. But the stream there, Eli Stream, is really cool. I could see a lot of stuff involved with that. You know, somebody sent me some information about the Ithaca Children's Garden where they have something similar like that. And so there's so many possibilities. So very excited and you know, looking forward to figuring out how we can use it the best way.
Prolong this, but I'm gonna have to. But I have gone down the hill in a sled a number of times, so I would appreciate hot chocolate and just the drying off.
I'll be there for you, Karen.
Because of the wet, yeah, right, but, you know, I think that, this is a great opportunity to, you know, now we can come back and revisit this, the property and the purchase and how much it's gonna cost and be able to plan it out appropriately. I mean, I think the one thing that is important as some of the facts that the mayor went through, that this purchase does cost us money, and it also costs us in terms of our debt. You know, our debt is going to increase because of this. So even though, you know, we paid what, 2.9, what, 2.9, but we did issue a $3.7 million bond ordinance to buy it. And then, you know, just like having a mortgage, you know, you buy your house for $250, but you do wind up paying, you know, a lot more than that for the house. So we are going to pay more than that in interest on this property. Right now, we're probably in short-term notes. I'm not for, you know, then we go to long-term notes, but it is a cost. There is the cost of maintenance, and we certainly didn't win. Unfortunately, did not get $1.5 million in grants for this. We're getting a lot less in Green Acres. So my concern is that we, you know, have a fiscal plan, but and have become very interested in, you know, selling or being able to monetize the farm market and the log cabin to be able to help offset the greater cost to the city than, you know, that we are incurring now than when we were planned to, I guess, when we bought the property a couple of years ago. And it's a beautiful property. The Holcomb House is really interesting, and it's great. Maybe we can get a volunteer to help us get it on register and to do some things, and to also, I'm very much in favor of, was a planner by trade, not anymore, but of employing a planner to plan that portion of the property so people can use it for trails and you know, and picnic tables and be able to figure out, plan, you know, how to park and do things accordingly and program it and be able to use it. But what I would like to do, let me cut to the chase, is maybe that we have a public session to be able to collect input here, do a little PowerPoint. The mayor would be happy with that, to be able to then at least set some parameters to then employ a planner to plan out the open space part of the property and address that, but that we could actually direct the planner and say, well, these are the options that we'd like you to consider. We'd like you to consider the farm market being used, you know, perhaps by Fisherman's Mark. We did do an RFI with it. That the farm market perhaps be used, but as an option. So then we have an open dialogue to talk about those options. So, you know, changing, you know, perhaps not changing the uses, but, you know, of those properties, and that we have that dialogue, and then we can get a planner and move ahead. But if we use the council meeting as a forum for that, I think it would be great to, you know, have the public, you know, to take time at a council meeting to talk about it and to talk about stormwater and the great planting plan that Mary Ann had sent us, because those are all things that we're concerned about. And get them all on the table, get them all on a chart, and then we can tell a planner what we want them to be doing and take a look at for us. So I try to be quick.
Quick.
No.
And I'll try to be quick too. Yeah, I'm very pleased with the council's thought on this already. You know, I've had some individual conversations, and it seems as though a lot of the priorities in purchasing the property are still kind of alive and well here in the city. At the council level, I do agree with the council. I think everybody's made the point that on some level, we should be recouping some funds back from this property if we can. I'll just quickly kind of review my priorities as a person, as I guess as the mayor. Certainly open space preservation is key. It's the number one thing for me, keeping the open space. This property was bought in 1705. The deed is in my office, handwritten. It's an incredible document. It's an incredible property. And I love the idea that the open space portion of it and the Holcomb House would remain really almost a critical piece of our engagement with the past and our successful engagement with kind of our everyday and future. So open space is a big priority for me. Certainly, I think Marianne Borges and some of the other people in town have really highlighted, I think, benefits to looking at this property in a certain light. The grant request that we sent in last year to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is an amazing opportunity to pull out all the invasive species, plant native meadows, do stormwater management, green infrastructure, incredible. And I would love, with the council's permission, to resubmit that potentially this year. And just a couple of other things. A year ago, yesterday, in closed session with the city council, I advocated the idea of selling the farm market. For me, it was one of the first ideas that was resonated because it felt like something that we could do without impacting the property too much. It's the cleanest breakaway from the rest of the parcel. It's got the driveway, it's already got the parking, and it's got an existing building. So, on record, I didn't get a chance to say that on record. I wanted to be responsible and kind of mind my manners for a while, but I think it's important that we take a serious look at selling the farm market and offering specifically Fisherman's Mark the first right of refusal for market value. I would note that while there was broad support for a farm market at the site, and I was part of the CAP, there was broad support for a farm market. I have to wonder whether the consequences of Ida have shifted more viewpoints than mine on the subject. A farm market would be lovely, but the support of Fisherman's Mark, the support Fisherman's Mark provides our community is integral to our values and the lives of so many of our locals which are in need. A couple of weeks ago, I attended the Lambertville Historical Society annual meeting here, in which Peter Crace presented his findings about the history of social service support in Lambertville. It was really a fascinating conversation. He noted the city had so many local programs in place to help the poor before the Depression, that when the Depression actually came, Lambertville was in a much better place than a lot of other communities. And I think that sticks, and we still have we still have a director of social services who's in City Hall working. And for me, Fisherman's Mark provides these programs, and I would love to see them continue in a place which is very visible and which says to the community, this is an important player in our community. This is somebody that provides support. I know that they have expressed interest in purchasing the property potentially, and that's something that I feel pretty strongly about as a person. So whether that happens or not, I don't know, but it's certainly on my priority list to give them the option. I would just say lastly, keeping the Holcomb House in the public trust is, I think, very important to me. Again, like the open space, I rate that very highly. I don't know what we would do with the building. I'm completely open to all kinds of ideas, but I want the city to own that building and to take care of it. The fact that it remained in that family for every generation since 1705, and it's been given, not given, we paid a lot for it. But now that we have it, I'd like to see it kind of continue there. Just lastly, a note too about process. I think that Councilwoman Kaminsky's idea about public meetings is great. I think that we should have a few. I'd love to open up the property again on a couple of Saturdays. Maybe we'll do it once a month for the next 2 or 3 months. It was so much fun to do on Saturday. I was glad to have people out there. I'd also thought that maybe we would devote the next Lambertville Matters printed newsletter solely to the Clausen property. We'll give its history. We'll talk about what we paid for it, how we might approach it, and that kind of thing. That's happening in March. We may or may not decide to do a very brief survey that will be hand delivered to every household in Lambertville, so we can rest assured that people will be well informed. And that's basically all I wanted to say on the subject, which seems like a lot, but It's a big topic and we're just starting, and I'm glad that the public is here and I'm glad that they're participating online. How many people do we have online?
Right now, we have 24. I think we maxed out at 30.
Okay, that's great. So that's it. Stay tuned. We will be in touch about this. We really appreciate everybody's support and feel free to share your ideas online. You call me, visit office hours, whatever works for you. Okay. What's that? Announcements. Oh, announcements. Oh, so the old announcement about dog and cat licenses, that we know later than Tuesday, February 28th. Paul, let's get on it. Parking stickers expired on 12/31. Meter enforcement begins tomorrow. So if you have a parking pass for the downtown area as it's expired, you might get a ticket tomorrow. So make sure you get to City Hall to purchase the new permits. And now I would open this up for the second public participation. The second public participation at these meetings is for items not on the agenda. So it's not a chance to revisit the conversation tonight. If you want to revisit some points that we made, you're welcome to call me or do that via email. The second public participation is for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anything that anybody wants to talk about tonight that's on the agenda? Okay, we have a couple people online, maybe.
Polly, you can go ahead.
Hi, Polly Anderson from 50 Lincoln Avenue. So much talk about the headquarters property. Are we changing the name? But nearby and across from that, the Village Apartments. I was wondering what is the status of bringing that back for, well, hopefully housing, but if nothing else, what else? And as they talked about the entrance to the city, you know, that's also something that could be done better. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Polly. The council is working with the contract purchaser for that site. I can't say anything more at this time. We've been in conversations with the contract purchaser since I think February. We are working with them in the city planner. So hopefully something will be brought to the public forum sometime this spring. I can't be more specific than that, but we are working on it behind the scenes. Somebody else?
Bart, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, it's Bert Thurber at 53 Lambert Lane. And if I may ask, because of the audio problems before, I was not able to weigh in on agenda related to the 500-year flood. If I'm not allowed to speak, I won't speak, but
Yeah, I think it's okay, Bart. If you didn't, certainly if you didn't hear, I don't see any reason to say no.
okay, thank you very much. So I just wanted to mention, because I understand that I heard the discussion at that point. I couldn't hear under any of the other previous comments. I do want to mention as a possible consideration, I don't know if it's legal, but because we purchased our property at 53 Lambert Lane in 2013, the definition of repetitive loss under section 201.2 would automatically make us retroactively a repetitive loss property for 2004 and 2005 when we were not there. And so one consideration is, I don't know if it would be possible to implement the 500-year flood plan for any future properties that are sold from the time that you pass the resolution. I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if it's legal, but I wanted to make a consideration because I don't know what the impact would be on myself and many other people on Lambert Lane automatically, retroactively, when we were not able. I don't even know if we will be able to get flood insurance anymore because we're already automatically a repetitive loss with two major losses in 2004, 2005. No comment is necessary, Mayor Norwick. I just wanted to pass that along. And I did very much appreciate the opportunity to go up to the Clausen property and look forward to future opportunities. Unfortunately, I won't be available on February 16th. So if there are other opportunities about the floodplain, I would greatly appreciate that if there were longer lead time. Thank you.
Sure. Bart, in case you didn't hear, just note that we will have a public information session next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock via Zoom. Certainly, you can call me or send me questions about the floodplain ordinance. I'm happy to respond via email or have Ken Rogers respond. So please, by all means, reach out with whatever questions or concerns you have. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else online? Okay.
With apologies, Helen Pettit, 6 Buttonwood. I think there's a deep misunderstanding of the substantial damage approach. If you have,
Helen, we're not gonna.
okay, but in a city code, if the code changes, you don't have to change your property to meet the city code until you have an event that damages a substantial amount of your property, and then you have to bring it up to code at that time. I think that's that's the same approach with this 500-year. When you change the zoning, the same thing. You're grandfathered in, maybe you're a commercial property in a residential area. That doesn't change until you do until there is a substantial damage situation, and then you have to conform. I don't think people just understand that. It's not imposed on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All done online. Okay, may I have a motion to close the public comment period?
Move.
Second.
All those in favor, please. say
Aye.
All right, may I have a motion, let's see, to adjourn the meeting. Second? Second. All those in favor, please get up and leave.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.